Hey everyone, welcome. As you're joining, don't forget to open up the chat, change your settings to panelists and attendees. Tell us where you're from, what you're doing, if you had a wonderful holiday, if you had a horrible holiday. Throw your LinkedIn in there so that we can all connect with each other. I'm coming to y'all from Fort Worth, Texas. Bruno, so good to see you again, my friend. That's one of my favorite things is seeing people that have been on these before. Love it. Hey, Seth, welcome from Atlanta. Nice to have you here. And we were just talking, Melissa, you're from St. Pete's, or are we allowed to call it St. Petersburg?
All the locals call it St. Pete, so
St.
St.
Pete's,
Pete,
okay.
Florida.
Hey, I am a proud non-local. I love being my little explorer, so maybe I'll have to come by and call it St. Pete's. And Ken, I know you said earlier you are from Northern California. What part? San Fran or?
No, it's actually Rockland. We're base of the Sierra Nevadas.
Wow. How far are you from Tahoe? Is that
50 miles. 50 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you
Kind of in the same
Bass Pro, that's my exit.
There we go. And hey, Kristen, nice to see you. I know we're getting some more people. As people are joining, I'm going to throw in a poll for us. Tell me who you are. What is your current role title? We want to make sure that everything is tailored exactly to who's here. So we've got a director, some VPs in here. Show us who you are. We've got an awesome, a really, really great session planned for us today. So we're going to get started here in a few minutes. Wow, I'm seeing so many amazing people that I've seen on other webinars. Nice to have y'all. Happy New Year. Welcome, Ralph.
I love all the New York City, New York.
Yeah, man, all the
Dropping
New York.
The virtual ball this year.
The VR glasses. Doing the real ball, but nobody can see it live, right?
Yeah.
That is so funny. I didn't know. Yeah, you know what? This is the first year. Okay, I'm like the worst 26-year-old. This is the first year that my husband and I are doing New Year's Eve in 5 years. I'm always in bed before 10, so I'm not too great with that. Hey, Shannon, welcome. Okay, so we have a lot of managers. I'm curious, if you're currently a manager, will you just raise your hand if you're like an aspiring manager or if you're actually currently a manager? Cool. Love seeing all of that. Okay. You can throw your hand in there. Hey, Daryl, coming in from Nova Scotia. Love to have you.
Hi.
Okay, so for today's session, I'll keep this poll going for just a little bit longer, but we have a lot of managers, directors, VPs, C-level execs coming in. So we have a lot of great information coming for y'all today. I'm going to end the poll so we can get started. But yeah, we've got a lot. And hey, you SDRs and AEs, this is a great opportunity for you to learn and coach up and be able to take what you're learning today and bring it to your managers and even try to get into that team lead role yourself. So we've got a lot of great stuff for y'all today. I'm going to throw this poll and look at this. Here we go. Can we all see that? Look at that. We've got a lot of managers. That is our top running today. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to exit this poll out. I am so excited to have y'all here. Once again, my name is Katie Ray. I am the Community Events and Engagement Manager over at Sales Hacker. We have an amazing lineup for today. In case you're trying to figure out why you're here, you just saw that you had sign up for something. Here's what we're doing. Today, we have Ken and Melissa, and we're going to be talking about building a positive sales culture for 2021, right? So understanding how do we make this happen whenever some teams are remote still and others are in the office, or your company has decided to do like partial remote, partial in the office, trying to understand how do you keep a very aligned team, understanding what goes into a game plan for success for your reps for next year, figuring out what actually went well. You know, we want to take time to actually celebrate the amazing successes our teams have had and different tips and tricks that we have learned this past year that's going to carry over for our success for next year. So we've got a lot of really great things going on. And before we get started, just a reminder, you want to make sure your chat is turned to panelists and attendees. Otherwise, not everyone's going to say or be able to see you saying hi. And also, we want this to be as engaged and exciting and inviting of a discussion as possible. So at the bottom bar where it says raise hand, you'll want to click the Q&A box right next to it and throw your questions in there so we can answer them in real time. So don't hesitate. If you've got any questions, anytime, throw them in. We'll be answering them on the fly. And we'll get kind of started from here. And I'm going to let Melissa, you can introduce yourself, then Ken, and then we'll just kind of jump into that. Does that work okay?
Sounds good.
That's good.
Great.
So, hi, my name is Melissa Murillo. I am the director of the sales development team over at Spirion. We are a data privacy and protection organization. Currently, I lead a team of 7 SDRs. And I started my career as an SDR and have kind of, worked my way up through the ranks. So I've lived it. I love it. And it really is a passion of mine to help, new SDRs coming into the role find their love of sales. It's really an exciting thing when you can see them find that joy and that spark, and really find that career path themselves. And this is Charlie. He'll probably be making guest appearances throughout the webinar. So.
I love that. Thank you, Melissa. We're so excited to have you on here. And a fun little fact, she is also one of our community leaders for Sales Hacker. So not only does she lead teams, but she also volunteers to be on some of our channels and sharing advice and suggestions. So, if you ever want to check her out, you can always find her there or on LinkedIn as well. Ken, what about yourself? Give us a little information about you.
Sure, absolutely. First time sales hacker here and presenting. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. But my name is Ken Zang. I'm an AVP currently at Ring Central for go-to-market programs. And I have been working, I'm a work from anywhere veteran for the last 20 years. Coming to you from a number of different organizations, worked at Oracle for over 15 years, WebEx for a few years, and so forth. So my background is pretty interesting in that I've been a sales consultant for a number of years. I've always transitioned a couple times in terms of a role of inside sales and also field sales. So I have carried a bag, and now in my role here today, I actually get to develop content for SDRs and BDRs. Along with enablement as well. So that's pretty interesting. But what Ring Central does is business communications, message, video, and phone in an integrated platform, are helping replace legacy PBX systems around the world. And so through this last year, it's been pretty exciting, but it has definitely been, a challenge in terms of, adapting. Right. So even though we are a company that provides technology, there's always different things that you can do. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of those today.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you. I'm selfishly really, really excited. I know Ring Central is doing a lot of amazing things. I know that they just partnered with Octalucent Enterprise. So that's a really exciting new focus and initiative. And that's actually where I came from in sales. So it's a really cool thing for me, but I'm really excited. And we're going to just kind of dive into this. I'm so excited to learn, what are some of the successes that you've actually had in such a year of turmoil for both of your teams, and kind of tell us those stories. What did you see as some problems, what you kind of came up with to overcome those, what that has looked like, so that we can kind of take those and use those pieces of advice. So whoever wants to go first.
Sure. So I can start. One of the biggest challenges is I was the type of leader that always encouraged my team to collaborate, to work together, to share best practices. We would have our daily morning stand-ups. And all of a sudden, and not to mention, we had just brought on quite a few new hires. So my team was a mixed bag of, people within their first 90 days, and then folks that have been on board for about a year. So all of a sudden, everybody was remote. How do we continue to enable the new hire skills while, keeping skills fresh and making sure that everybody's still getting that team dynamic at home. So one of the first things we did was we created a buddy system. And this can work for not just new hires and veterans, but, it can be two veterans working together. But the whole point was, to have a go-to, somebody that you can talk to throughout the day, and also formulate a game plan with in the morning. So one of the things that I asked my team to do is get with your buddy, figure out what your plan of attack is for the day, and then email me your buddy's plan of attack. So that way it's forcing them to work together to idea share. And then it also holds them accountable to what they committed to do for the day. And then I would also run contests leveraging, okay, it's this pair with this pair with this pair, and, whoever can accomplish X by the end of the week, that set will win. So, and then I would change up the buddies as we would go. Another thing that worked well was just, on our morning huddle stand up virtual. I really encouraged everybody, have your cameras turned on, stay engaged. And I would literally just kind of sit back for the first 5 minutes and let everybody talk, because that's something they would do if we were in the office. But being remote, you don't just want to launch into work. They still need that opportunity to build those connections and those relationships. So just sitting back, letting them have that time to do that. And then also trying to schedule, opportunities for them to get together in a more relaxed setting, virtual happy hours, trivia nights, things like that, just to keep some fun and positivity in the workday, because everyone was so isolated. So those were some of the things that worked well, that I took out of 2020.
So just sorry, Ken, you go.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that there was a couple of points in there. I mean, they were fantastic, right? Is that, in terms of the productivity time, and everybody talks about the various different fatigues, in terms of what we're experiencing, so forth. And I think a little bit is that we schedule so many different things back to back to back to back to back. And we don't have that breathing time, right? And I think that breathing time is super duper important. So it's almost like you have to explicitly say, hey, look, here's my pre-meeting time, here's my meeting time, here's my post-meeting time. But also on top of that, that you have a set agenda that includes getting to know the people that are in the room. I mean, we're talking about hiring people, right? You're hiring people, you're doing interviews with people that you've actually never physically met. You've only met them over video, right? And so, of course, you're using references and you're getting the background on those folks, and you have to use that skill set even more so. It's even more important. But just having that breathing room, I think, is super duper important, right? And I think that everyone should sort of take that time to actually do that. And overall, you'll say, oh my goodness, because when you look at sales calls, right, and you say, well, if I take 5 minutes out of my day, that's one extra meeting per day. What does one meeting per day mean to my quota at the end of the quarter, right? It's a lot. However, like for folks to be supercharged, to have that energy that you need to do your job, ultimately, you're going to be more effective.
Well, and I think you made some really interesting points in it. It actually kind of made me reflect for a quick second on how often we book back to back to back to back calls, and you're sitting at your desk for 5 hours and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I've just been on calls nonstop. And it's like, I haven't talked to any of my teammates. I haven't slacked anyone. How do I continue that culture? How do I continue that connectedness? So I think that's really interesting as well. And Daniel asks a really good question. And this is actually something I was curious about as well, is what are some of these results that you saw after these sessions? So were there more relaxed conversations? Did your numbers go up, or did they stay pretty similar when so many teams' numbers have faltered this past year? What did that type of success look like?
It's tough to manage accurately, just given the current climate of the business. The last several months have been extremely tough, especially with the holidays and all the other outside things going on. But we really have seen more collaboration between the teams. They're, feeling comfortable asking each other for help. They're more comfortable brainstorming ideas. And that was one other thing that we would do on our team calls on a Monday. It was, we would go round robin and just, what is it that you want to accomplish today or this week? What is going to be your focus? Who are your target accounts you're going to be going after? What are you going to be leveraging outside of your, existing cadences? Are you going to really focus on, doing some LinkedIn prospecting? Are you going to leverage your intent data out of, Zoom info? Are you going to be, we happen to have a power dialer. Are you really going to be leaning into your power dialer? So what are those things you're going to do to make sure you're successful this week? And having them all talk about it on a call, and also calling out who was successful the week before and what worked for you. So I would actually ask them what worked last week and what didn't work last week, so that everybody can learn from what other people are doing and what their findings are. Because the one thing I've learned about sales is it is constantly changing, and what worked yesterday won't work today. And so we have to remain agile and adaptable, and they're on the front lines on the phone. So, I really need them to tell me what's working, so that as I'm helping them to build cadences, I can adapt. As we're setting goals and talking through that with leadership, I can bring that back based on the feedback I'm getting from my team. So really keeping that two-way communication.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And one of the other thing about keeping it fun, we here have not, we've run so many contests, right, to keep the motivation up. I was never big on contests personally before, right? In the last year, I've definitely seen a positive effect of it. And I think it's a little bit of, it helps gravitate people together in terms of teams. Now, they don't necessarily, they always have your regional teams and things like that, but there are different ways that you can mix it up. But we have done a number of different, all the way from the top, in terms of just making sure that you're leveraging the right tools and reinforcing that, all the way down to having different, what we consider as, what you would consider as a normal spiff, right? Of sort of rewarding the behavior that you're looking to develop. And it was fun. And you talk about, like, how do you measure this, right? And some of these things aren't necessarily measurable, right? The measurement, of course, always at the end of the day is sales. Are you, getting the right number of qualified leads? Are you getting those appointments set? Things like that. But, again, it is really sort of the long game here in this particular year. Are you doing it? Are you making your number while the employee is feeling good about what they're doing? Are they having the right, mental frame of mind? Are they going to be able to sustain that? Of course, that role is a development role. You want them ultimately to continue to graduate out of that role and take a sales role, right? And so you're going to want them to be able to not necessarily get burnt out. So you have to always do things to keep it fresh, keep it real. And again, that long game is really will measure the success.
Yeah. Ken, you brought up a great point too, and something that we are in the process of implementing at my current organization, because I actually switched companies right in the heart of the pandemic. And so I had previously used the gamification type softwares. I'll stay vendor agnostic, but they really are great platforms. I've used a couple different ones, but the one consistent is that even working remotely, they sit inside Salesforce. So it just gives added visibility, not only to leadership, but to the sales teams to see, how they're tracking for the day, how many calls they've made, how many emails they've sent, what are their numbers look like? Have they had any of their discovery calls qualified? Have they, who's made the most calls? When they do, it splashes with something fun and they can pick their anthems. You can run your sales contests out of there so you don't have to track them manually. But the biggest takeaway too, that I really love these platforms for, is for coaching. And it's just a great place to be able to see all the metrics, but then also, have a two-way dialogue within the platform that you can record to see what are our trends, what are we working on, what's our gap plan. So then when you go back in the next week, you can actually pick right up where you left off, as opposed to trying to do it back and forth via emails, which is what, I'm currently doing, but it's not the most streamlined approach. So those gamification softwares, especially while working from home, I think can be a huge game changer and motivator for the teams, especially if you have very competitive sales teams like I do. They don't want to see themselves at the bottom of the leaderboard for any of the metrics. So, this guy's beating me in calls, watch this. This person's got more meetings booked today than me, watch this. So, it's just another way to keep energy levels high while everybody's kind of isolated and remote.
Yeah, that's a really interesting part. I'm curious, has that helped to, I guess, kind of like stabilize the success the team is having? Or do you feel like or at least the culture is continuing to be where it was as if you were in the office?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, I'll take that one. I think that, when you start looking at the environments that we're in right now, I mean, we definitely took one step, definitely in one direction, far to the remote work from anywhere approach. I think that, moving forward, I think it's really going to be more of a hybrid approach, right? And so I think that, just like sales, right? Sales is very much a hybrid approach. If you're a remote salesperson and you have a territory, you're typically in that territory, right? And HQ is supporting you and things like that. And I think that those are the types of skills, right, that will carry throughout your sales career, of being not necessarily in the HQ location, right, or in the bullpen, right? I fondly always refer to this bullpen because I used to love it, right? But there's certain things that happen in the bullpen, right, that you learn about. But the other skill set that you have to learn is being able to be autonomous, right? Being able to be driving on your number and get the right things done and the right focus. And so I guess in a certain way that this environment is actually sort of helping prepare, right, these sellers to potentially do that job in a field sales motion, right? And some people always stay inside, right? But some people aspire to be outside. And so if you look at it from that perspective, everything that they're doing has a purpose. And so in this particular case of 2020, it could be used as purposeful, right? Of building the muscles that are necessary for the future to be able to be a successful rep, right? So having all the necessary things on, setting your things up on Friday so that you're coming in on Monday, that you're banging everything out, you're meeting your goals, you're meeting your metrics, you're doing everything, you're doing the right research, you're scheduling those appointments earlier, right? So you can always make sure that you're filling your block, right? All those small little types of things I think are super duper important. But that would be my perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And especially one thing that really hit home for me of what you said is all these things that we're doing right now, especially putting some of our younger reps in these more remote environments, is really going to be a telltale sign of what their success could look like as a field rep. And having, for me personally, worked in the field, knowing what that isolation is like, but also having these amazing tools and opportunities to, like you said, Melissa, have some gamification where you're bringing in this culture is a really cool little transitional period for a lot of these reps. So I think that's incredibly insightful. We do have a few questions from Daniel and Eric, and I'll start with Daniel's. His first follow-up question is, how do you manage frustration from team members when they fail to meet their weekly objectives, or team members who during several months did not win a contest? I'm sure, your answers are probably very fluid with the past few months versus, a normal time period. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So with the reps, I always like to, and kind of you mentioned this already, Katie, it's the long game, right? So sales reps aren't always going to have a great week. They're not always going to have a great month. But what I really look for more than anything is the effort that is being put in, and are they really working to get better and improve, and are they doing the right actions? If the answer is yes, and they miss their numbers for a week or two, it's not the end of the world. It's sales, it happens. In terms of, what about those individuals that aren't, winning contests? The way I like to look at the contests that I run with my teams is, what behaviors am I trying to drive? So it's not always about, how many meetings did you book this week? How many calls did you make? So for example, when I started at my new organization, nobody was leaving voicemails. And I know that voicemails can actually work if you leave them. So I did a training with my team, and one of the contests I ran was leave voicemails, and for every callback, I'll give you $10. I did another one where, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, I wanted them to start leveraging Vidyard videos in their emails, and then also leveraging video on LinkedIn. And I told them, for every reply they get on one of their video emails, I'll give them $25. So it's more about driving the behaviors sometimes than even about hitting numbers. And it also makes it achievable for every single person on the team, not just the top performers. So that's kind of how I try to keep it fresh and make sure that everybody has a chance to be successful and win some spiff money.
I think something you just said is really interesting as well, and I hope everyone caught this too, is you're figuring out how to make sure that everyone has those successes, right? It's not just like the top players every single time, because that is we've all been there. We've all had off weeks, off months, and it can be so just defeating. That's what we say in our houses. I just feel really defeated today. And so making sure that as a leader, you have an opportunity to make sure that you touch every single one of your employees exactly where they're at and coach them upward. So I think that is just amazing. I hope everyone's taking notes on that, because I think that is wonderful. Ken, what do you have to add for it?
No, I love that. And it's so true, right? You have to reinforce the good behaviors, because you'll find out really, in terms of how you've mapped your territories, whether or not they're balanced through running spiffs real quick, right? After the first couple of weeks, you'll find that out. And then it's about, again, the right behaviors. What are the right behaviors? You can go ahead and do for creativity on, right? How do you penetrate account? How do you most creatively, penetrate account? How do you do objection handling in a creative way? Or how do you use various different tools, right? How are you a risk taker and try different things? Being able to talk about those types of stories. The other thing in terms of career development too, as well, on those is that, you'll find those folks who are natural enablers, right? Or people who want to share their best practices. So you can also reward those types of sessions too, as well. And I think that that's one of the big things about, being in this type of environment, is that you can pull in so many different people from so many different regions, even for field sales folks too, as well, right? They might not geographically be in the same place, but you can get them together, right? So, we just recently worked on the agenda for sales kickoff, right? With all regions, right? And so some folks are having to move around in time zones, but that could never have been the case, right? You would have always had one meeting, then shared the meeting with somebody else, right? And that person always, inevitably always says, oh, I'm always last to the agenda, right? Because of time or geography and so forth. And so those types of things, real time collaboration now can sort of happen on a more frequent basis. So there are some good things, out of this as well. But yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%.
I love that. And we have a few questions on here too to kind of dovetail into. Oh my gosh, all the questions just popped up. And this actually, so Roberto just asked one that I think is really interesting. And he's wondering, how do we promote and motivate our top sellers without demotivating the ones who don't achieve it? I know we kind of talked a little bit about making sure that there's spiffs for everyone at whatever stage they're at. but what are some tools that maybe both of you have used to help really, pardon my language, light a fire under their ass to really kind of get them to that next step? What does that look like?
And you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick off on that one. Yeah, and it's related to Eric's question too, as well, or sort of in the fatigue aspect. Every single person, right, through what I've learned in this period of time, and I'm not necessarily, I'm coaching and motivating, my team, right? And it's that everybody sort of has their own way, right, and their own tolerance to fatigue, right? And so one of the things that I've done, especially here and in the past too as well, is I really do try to figure out that personal connection with every single one. And I don't mean just the personal connection in terms of what motivates them, but you also got to figure out the right time. When can you catch them such that they're most willing to share their details, right? Or their thoughts. And so I had one employee, right, who would always, when I would catch them, they were always walking. And I always noticed that when they were walking or doing something while sort of multitasking, they're always most free with their information. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to give you a call at 3:30 because I know that you're going to be walking. That's what your normal thing is. So then you catch them on those times. And so then those sessions then become the most productive. So when you're doing coaching or you're trying to find what motivates them, try to figure out what works for them, right? And the small little thing that you do in terms of personalizing that session or that coaching session or that period can really make a difference.
I love that. Yeah. Finding them where they're at, understanding what they need. I think that's great. We still have a lot of questions, so we're just going to kind of go through some of these. And I know some of you, well, both of you had mentioned these Zoom happy hours, Zoom meetings, taking time to kind of make it as realistic with these Zoom calls. So we let the reps chat, let our team members kind of chit chat before we get started. How are you helping your teams with Zoom fatigue, right? We're all sitting in front of our camera, like I said earlier, for 5 hours, back to back calls. How does that work? Have you figured out that good balance of, I know you're working at home now and you're on calls all day long, and now we're doing call happy hours and call games and call trivia. How do we have that balance? What's worked well for you all?
I know for my team, and coming in at this new organization, they were asked to be on quite a few more meetings than what I was used to. So, I've tried to dial back their meetings for them as much as possible, seeing what I could take off their plate. When we go through our one-on-ones, having them show me their calendars, figuring out what we can remove. I have cut my daily stand-ups to 3 times a week as opposed to 5, just so that they're not getting burnt out. Understanding that this is a different time that we're in. And in terms of the happy hours, I normally tie some Swift dollars to it to make it a little bit more enticing, so they want to come. Last week we did a Christmas happy hour, so it was ugly Christmas sweater contest, Christmas background contest, and then we did Christmas trivia. And I was awarding monetary prizes for all of the above. So just trying to find ways to keep it fun, so that they still want to engage, because you do learn a lot about one another in a more relaxed setting, which, whether you realize it or not, seeps into the fabric of the team culture, and can really help the overall dynamic and the ability of the team to work together. Because if they feel comfortable with each other, if they, enjoy working together, they're going to be more active on Slack in the team channels. They're going to be more apt to congratulate one another. They're going to be more apt to cheer each other on because they genuinely like one another. And given that, I do have half of my team remote in different parts of the country. So even once we are back together, we're still going to be segmented. It's just a way to keep everybody feeling like we are still one team.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that leading a remote team has changed since both of you have worked in remote environments in the past, or like Ken are still working remotely? Do you feel like it's changed just because of the uncertainty of this past year? Or do you think, for those of us who've always been remote or have been in the past 3 or 4 years, that's just kind of, it is what it is? What do you think?
I think it's a little bit, to be honest, I think it's, and I've gone up and down through this entire year too as well. But I do think it comes down to the discipline aspect of it, right? Is that you have to carve out the amount of time. Like you want to be absolutely 100% genuine, but you have to create those opportunities for genuineness, right? And so if you don't carve out the time, then you don't give that space to be able to do it. I do think that, a lot of, preference is a big thing. And I'll go back to that. I always remember the folks who like IMs. I know the people who like phone calls. I know the people who like video. You know what I mean? And I work to their preference, right? And it's just the same way. It's like when folks are looking for opportunities, some people like social media. Some people like picking up the phone. Some people like, so it is all about preference. And so understanding those and sort of tuning into those are super duper important, because that's actually what we're asking the role to actually do with their prospects, is to actually align with them, right? And so it's that whole thing, and you can have that teachable moment with your folks as well. But I mean, generally, the one thing that I do want to sort of talk about is that, you do have the opportunity though through all of this, right, to always build skills, right? And so for me, remotely has always been share a presentation, use it as an opportunity to actually do a presentation, right? I love how you're saying share the calendar, right? Because you're doing a behavior that's working with them collaboratively, rather than just like asking them for, hey, are you going to make this deal? What's about this deal? And this and so forth, right? So, I mean, one day video will actually have AI to be able to say, with certainty, let's say your response is, I'm going to put you at 50%, right? The technology will begin to take over. But I do think it's super duper important, right? That personal connection, what we're asking them to do with their prospects is sort of what we need to do here. But in terms of the fun, I'm a fun guy, but it's a discipline. I mean, like Melissa said, you have to find those times to be able to sort of find those connections outside of the workplace. We just hosted last week a wedding shower for one of our
love that
teammates, right? And what we did in the game itself was to actually learn about each other, right? So we learned about how each of the team, how they met their wife or husband, right? What they wore. We actually had people dress up in, in their outfits and their suits and things like that. But in every single thing that you do, you find different skill sets of folks. Like, who knew that we actually had somebody on our team who could actually preside over a wedding, right? And so you find interesting things like that, but you just got to have the opportunity to actually do those things.
I'm kind of curious, do you both feel that because of the remote environment, you're learning more about your team members than you necessarily would if you were in the office? I feel like I am. I don't know if it's like a common thing or not, so I'm just kind of curious.
I don't necessarily. I think there is something to be said for the face-to-face, over the wall, coffee, conversation. Yeah. I will say it's been a lot more challenging to meet and just understand other individuals' roles within the organization that I don't work with directly on a consistent basis. I mean, I know everybody in sales and marketing, but outside of that, the engineering, support, professional services, I really don't know anyone on that side of the house just because I don't work with them. So in that regard, it has been challenging. The other area that I will say has probably been the biggest challenge for me is just in onboarding new reps. That is something that I haven't quite found the secret sauce for yet, doing remotely. Especially at my company, we have a video library with great resources, but we don't have an actual sales enablement team that will do that deep dive on product and tools. And so, it's really left up to the manager to try to teach them the tools and the roles and kind of have them shadow via Zoom call or team call another rep so that they can see what they're doing, how they're doing it. You don't realize how much new reps learn just by being in earshot of somebody else on the phone. And they get off and they say, hey, what were you talking about? That was a great tactic you used. Let me try that. Let me write that down. So I would say it has slowed onboarding time down.
Yeah.
Has been probably the biggest challenge that I've run into this year. Being a full remote SDR team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that environment, right? Being able to hear other people and what their talk tracks were and how they approach it, what their timing was. It's almost like a comedian, right? It's all about timing. When to throw in that discovery question at the right time to get the right response, to learn the right information. I couldn't agree more. I mean, they're in a hybrid environment, you're never going to be able to sort of replicate that. I think that you can do exercises that sort of help, the teaming. I love that one that you talked about in terms of the teaming. We used to, long time ago, actually have other folks listen in on calls or actually join the call and just say, hey, I have my colleague here. He's going to join us here today, just to learn. It does sort of establish sort of that, that you do care about other people, right? And it's not just necessarily about them and the prospect, and they understand what the scenario is and they're understanding about it. And it's always another fresh set of eyes. But I think that, having worked remote and having been a field salesperson and in inside sales, I do think that the technology, and there is an opportunity in this, right? And it always is building, right? When you're just a field salesperson and you can only physically go there, right? The amount of time that you spend, you can't have those small conversations, right? You can't have those small little wins along the way. You can't bring other people into the, those influencers into the account, right? To be able to do more presentations. So I think that this does sort of, this sort of remote does build good behaviors, right? Of having these small wins along the way. And then hopefully at the point where you physically meet, it's really more of a party or a celebration for closing the deal, right? I mean, that's the way that you have to look at it, just to make sure that, we're all looking at it from a positive way. Because I mean, we could definitely say, oh, it's all negative. But I mean, some people actually do appreciate this because, like buyers themselves are very extremely busy, right? So being able to sort of reach them in the way that they want to be reached and the frequency and they want to be reached. Some buyers definitely like more touch. Some buyers rather do their own research and you're just feeding them information and so forth. So, again, it's trying to figure out that cadence and that connectivity between each, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah. I know we are already at about 45 minutes in, which is wonderful. So I'm going to ask about 2 questions and then we'll kind of wrap up from here. We've spent so much time kind of talking about what's worked really well, how we've been able to navigate some of these obstacles that we've all been dealing with. How do we onboard? What are some best practices for keeping this consistent culture, making sure that our reps are met with exactly what they need, with where they're at. And so kind of moving into 2021, what are some, maybe 1 to 3 ideas of best practices of what you've learned from this past year that you want to take into 2021, that maybe you're being more intentional about planning some lessons that you've learned into what your success and your game plan for success for your team's going to look like.
Yeah, I'll start that one off. I think that I think what's good about knowing what 2021, I mean, and knock on wood, right? I think that we at least know what we're faced with, right? So a little less unknown rather than getting thrown into a situation and sort of having to sort of reel it in. So I think being able to more thoughtfully plan on what the year looks like under these conditions, now at least we know what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. I think is probably the best advantage that we have. But now in terms of what to do, I think trying to come up with the right plan to be able to match where we're at, in this sort of hybrid approach, I think is super duper important. And then leveraging all the resources that you have. I think that's one of the other things too as well, is like starting off early, knowing that, hey, look, this is my new cadence. This is my new reality.
Yeah.
When you're talking about training and enablement, leveraging those folks, being able to sort of reach out to the various different other groups that support you in more of an explicit way, right? Of doing, and I got to get back to this myself, right? Inviting other people into your team meetings, right? Your guests, right? What perspectives do they have about the organization that they can shed light that help them, motivate them, or give them a different perspective of what's going on. I haven't done a great job at that. I'm sort of going through my head the list of that I need to do, because those are things that I've been able to do in the past very successfully, but it's just sort of gotten squeezed out in the time. Now I think there is going to be more time to be able to do that. But yeah, coming up with the plan, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, those were great points, Ken. And, to piggyback on those, some of the things that have really been important and are just going to remain as important going into 2021 is just staying transparent with my team. I've always tried to be the type of leader that, I'm transparent to a fault. Whereas if I'm asking them to do something, I want them to understand the why behind it, because they're more likely to get on board and take action. And especially now that we are remote, they're not necessarily privy to as many higher level conversations as they might be if they were in the office. So I really try to be overly communicative. I like to tell them what's coming down, the pike, so there are no surprises, and that they understand everything that I'm asking them to do and why I'm asking them to do it. And I want it to be a two-way dialogue, so that if they have other ideas or objections, I can bubble those up as well. The other thing that I'd like to get into doing more of in 2021 is up-leveling employees, getting them to that next stage. And Ken, you talked a lot about this, and unfortunately with COVID, those opportunities for advancement, it's really hindered that growth just because of the uncertainty. There haven't been positions opening, there haven't been the opportunities for advancement. And I've got some phenomenal talent on my team. And so I really want to find ways to start getting them ready for that next role. Having them lead some of our weekly team trainings, having them bring the ideas that, are making them successful, and really relying on them more to help them with their skills. And then I think the last thing that we really learned from this year that's going to be imperative next year is just staying agile. We did our ICP at the beginning of the year, and it has changed more times during COVID than, you can possibly imagine, because the industries or the verticals that we thought were going to be our targets all of a sudden, blew up, not in a good way because of COVID. Or on the opposite end, all of a sudden we've got these industries that we weren't looking at before that, now they're dealing with more sensitive data than they've ever imagined. I mean, look at, some of these retailers that traditionally were brick and mortar, and now almost all of their sales are being done online. And they're like, crap, we have all this customer data that we weren't expecting to have. So, really staying agile and realizing that just because we had this game plan, just because we did this ICP work, doesn't mean it's not going to change tomorrow. And really just remembering that, we have to be able to continue to look at the market, watch the trends, and stay on top of things so that we as an organization can remain successful and aligned with the needs of the market.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I haven't thought about how ICPs have been changing so much and understanding that, the past eight months or so, I guess almost a year now, right, is that the buying process has changed. I'm so happy that I switched to marketing, because I can't even imagine, the past few months and what the roller coaster would be like. as a salesperson, it sounds incredibly stressful. With that said, and as we're kind of wrapping this up, I'm curious, what are some, if you want to give a shout outs to certain products, what has really kind of been the glue for success for your teams? What, I know, Melissa, you had mentioned, I think Vidyard. What are some other products that your teams have been using that have been incredibly successful? Intra-office communication tools, whatever that is. What are maybe 2 or 3 of those that you would recommend other people look at?
For my team, we have Gong. I love it for sales coaching. My team knows if they don't bring a call with them, I'm just going to go and find one, which is almost scarier to them. But I will actually copy and paste that link right into the coaching tool that we're using, which is the same as the gamification platform. And so we can have those call links, and then I can build libraries in there as well, which is one of the things that's helped with onboarding some new hires, is just having that library of calls where we can say, okay, this one, listen for the objection handling, and this one, listen to, how they pitch Spirion, or in this one, listen to how they close this call and ask for the meeting. So Gong is a phenomenal tool. We love it. I love Sales Loft and Outreach. I've used both. I'm, again, staying agnostic, but having a cadencing tool like that, to build out, to make sure your reps are getting in the right amount of touches, to make sure they're reaching their prospects. Because Ken brought it up, not everyone likes to be communicated with in the same fashion. Some people prefer phone calls. Some people prefer emails. Some people prefer LinkedIn. So with a cadencing tool, it just makes sure that you're hitting all that those touch points along the way. And hopefully by the end, the prospect just feels so bad for ignoring you that they'll at least reply, is my motto at least. And then for inter-office communication, we use Microsoft Teams. So, those are just some of the tools that we leverage that have really helped to make us successful.
Good. Awesome. Thank you. Ken, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, of course, being a tools vendor ourselves, I would say ours. I had a lot of different reasons as to why, but we provide tools for message, video, and phone integrated all in a single platform. Makes it super duper easy for folks to be able to communicate how folks want to be communicated with. I think the one big thing that actually is pretty unique that I always find interesting is that a lot of conference calls, a lot of video calls, and things like that. We're very unique in the fact that we are browser based, or at least we leverage a technology called WebRTC. So there's never a client to actually have to download. So I mean, you guys can probably relate to this. Hopefully you don't, but I mean, so many calls, you're wasting a good 5-10 minutes in the beginning of the call with one attendee inevitably has a older version of it holding everybody up. Totally waste of productivity. So in this particular case, we solved that issue. That gives back sales productivity. I always find that is a huge thing. But in terms of other tools, I think that one of the big things about our culture here is always developing relationships, right? Valued relationships with every one of our prospects. And then also too, as well, when we're talking about the team building and things like that, is through RBE tools, right? So like a Sendoso platform and things like that, right? Being able to personalize things, I think has been a big one for us this year, at least for myself too, as well, in the role that I have. And then, personalization, we've been trying to really use various different, with regards to outreach, being able to personalize messages, I think is super duper important, right? Being able to make sure that we're always starting with value statements, right? In terms of the benefits, but measurable, quantifiable, measured value benefits, I think is super duper important. And being able to always name drop, right? We've done a lot of work in terms of building those, that Rolodex of companies that we're working with. They're helping change and transform their organizations, and being able to give these folks the confidence that they need and the information so that they can have and give more tailored types of messages and approaches to these prospects to try to reduce the noise that they may be receiving. So less generic, more tailored, we definitely have done. And then, again, being able to build those personal relationships as best as possible to differentiate themselves, I think is sort of some of the tools that I would say are very, very important.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I know we have gone over so much. I'll kind of try and wrap us up here. Like I said earlier, we focused on best practices that we've learned from 2020. How do we create this culture? How do we maintain this culture? How do we meet our reps where they're at and our team members? And I think one of the coolest things is this isn't just for salespeople, right? Meeting your team members where they are, whether it be finance, HR, encouraging them, making it super personalized so that they feel that they're a part of the team with a positive culture. And then we focus on how do we take what we've learned and bring it into this next year, and how do we create a baseline game plan for success based off of what we've learned, based off of what we've seen our reps and our team members push themselves to do and to accomplish in such challenging times. And then we've also kind of just recently talked about some practical application tools to really help create that personalization for your customers, to create and maintain that positive culture within your organization, and to also help with productivity. So I know we've touched on so much today, but I am so happy that we had you, Ken, and you, Melissa, on this conversation. I mean, we've really hit a lot of topics today, and I've loved seeing the questions and discussions, and I know that we've had a lot going on. So don't forget, we always have webinars Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so our next one will be next week, next Tuesday, because Thursday is a wonderful holiday, hopefully a nice little transition into a fabulous new year. But until then, I am so thankful for both of you and for your time today. And I know our attendees are as well. And if they want to reach out to you, do they just add you on LinkedIn? Is that the go-to place?
Please, absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, with all that said, it is almost end of time. I just want to say thank you again so much. It was a blast. I learned so much. I know our attendees did as well. And from that, have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. We'll hop off and hopefully see y'all next time.